We rely very heavily on our agricultural community. We have senior meteorologist at Nutrien Ag Solutions, Andrew Pritchard, joining us now. And I mean, Andrew, no doubt about it, it's been a soggy summer for so many. But I want to kick off our conversation and look back a little bit more so, at least into the spring season, which is a very important time for farmers because this is also planting season. And for some, it was also a wet season. So how did this impact overall the earlier part of our planting and growing period?
Absolutely. Well, I'll take you back even further to last fall when we had widespread drought across the central U.S., including a lot of the Cornbelt here, which was good for harvest, but it got us off to a bit of an uncomfortable start coming out of the winter with some of our what we call teleconnections here pointing towards potentially an increased risk for drought during the growing season, kind of carrying on into that. We didn't see that. So that's good news. We actually got the opposite, which was that very stormy pattern. Like you said, it was problematic for some. You know, rain is good, but too much rain in that soil is going to make it hard to get those heavy tractors out into the field. So I had a lot of people in the Ohio Valley who had trouble planting, had to replant, and in some cases didn't even get those crops into the ground as we came out of April, May, into June. It's crucial then as we get into the summertime. You mentioned there we're prone to getting stuck in weather patterns here, and so we want to know, are we going to get stuck with heat and drought, or is it going to be a hot, stormy summer? And it's really been the latter there, hot and stormy across the Corn Belt. So the crops behind me, they look great. You can drive across the Corn Belt, and a lot of them look really good, and we'll be kind of looking to those rains over the next several weeks, where they fall, where they don't fall, and where the heat is the most intense to try to look at where we might see some stress start to creep into this crop.
And I guess that's the question, Andrew, about the crop and the nature of, as we're looking there, you're in Champaign, got the corn crop, how tolerant it is to maybe these periods of drier weather and dare I say, even abnormally dry conditions, which could ultimately lead into a drought. Surely there are, you know, an element of protections that farmers have against those abnormally dry spells.
Sure. I mean, plant technology has come a long way, and so these crops are kind of resistant to that. And in some cases, some heat is good this time of the year. The crops are, you know, the corn behind me is getting into pollination and then grain fill, so it likes a little bit of heat there. But it's when we get that prolonged excessive heat, when we get temperatures getting above 95 degrees for several days, and then there's also an overnight low component there where it's extremely muggy. It's sometimes hard to cool down overnight. And so when these plants are experiencing overnight lows that don't fall below 75 or 70 degrees there, we can start to get some stress to crop in there as the plant is spending more energy trying to cool itself down than it is kind of filling the grain and taking care of itself there. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Some heat, some dryness is definitely good this year, but it's those areas where it was extremely wet during the spring and early summer where we quickly flip to a hot, dry pattern. I think that's more likely across parts of the central and southern plains, southern portions of the Corn Belt here. That's where we start to worry about flash drought developing and getting some stress rapidly accumulating on these crops.
And I have to put this out there because you're in Champaign, Illinois, which Stephen knows. I used to work in Champaign-Urbana. I used to live and drive by these cornfields day after day, and I know how humid it can get and how beautiful it can be as they grow real tall. But when it comes to these prolonged periods, I mean, what is considered prolonged? Like, what window are we looking at where farmers are thinking, okay, 1 to 2 days, 5 days of high heat, no rain, we can handle that? At what point does it become concerning for that flash drought?
Yeah, that's absolutely, it's a great question. There's context needed there. And again, I mentioned that 95-degree high temperature level, kind of getting above that. And so it's, you know, a day, 2, 3 days of that is not going to ruin a crop. It's when we start talking about 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks there, where suddenly, you know, these evaporation rates are really high. We're zapping the moisture out of the soil. We're stressing these crops here. So the other, you know, component I mentioned there is those warm overnight lows, which we're really getting into a stretch here late July into early August, where we'll be dealing with that here. So again, these crops, they're pretty resilient and they can tolerate some of this, but in areas where we start to see this getting into that 2 to 3 week time frame where we're seeing, you know, days on end with highs in the 95 to 105 degree range, or those warm overnights and a lack of rainfall, that we might start to see some of that stress. But really, as we look at the forecast here the next couple of weeks, there's a lot of the Corn Belt and the Ag Belt here that looks hot and stormy, and that's probably going to be just fine for these crops.
Quick question before we let you go, because it's really tough, especially when you're dealing with agriculture and crops, because you guys really do lean into the teleconnections, the seasonal forecast. Yes. You're looking beyond the 72 hours, which In a lot of ways, people are just concerned with, all right, what's tomorrow going to be? As we near harvest season, before we let you go, does it look like we might be able to yield a decent crop this season? Notably, I guess, in the Cornbelt, since we're talking about it. Given what we have to show right now, are you optimistic?
Sure. Plenty of reason for optimism. I wish I had that crystal ball that could tell us, there's so many wild cards as we get into August and September. I mean, you guys know this. These tropical systems that can develop down in the Gulf and then migrate up into the Corn Belt can bring timely rains. It could bring way too much rain. How this heat dome expands here over the next couple of weeks will have a big difference on, where the timely rains fall. But right now, the end of July, this is, as good as we could ask for in a lot of areas here. A crop that's doing well, and so we just got to kind of get it across the finish line, knowing that, again, these crops are resilient, and we just got to watch for where these problem spots really start to jump out at us and understand that there might be a bit of a yield hit right there. But sure, staying away from predicting the markets and trying to look into the crystal ball, I would say plenty of reason for optimism right now.
If you could read that crystal ball, you'd be a billionaire, by the way.
That's what I tell everybody.
You would be, right? I don't envy the life of a farmer because you are very, very tied to that forecast and how your crop will be and what that will yield for profits. But we rely on our farmers. They're very important. We appreciate you weighing in. Senior meteorologist with Nutrien Ag Solutions, Andrew Pritchard. Best of luck as we navigate the rest of the season, right?
Absolutely. Thanks as always for having me.
Yeah. All right.